Welcome back to the Pro Wrestling Push Me poll for June 1990, wrestling's only objective, weighted, data-driven ranking system based on which pro wrestlers were getting the biggest push across the industry in a given month and year. WWF World Champion The Ultimate Warrior was back in the number one spot after the slump of last month's dismal post-WrestleMania house show numbers. But although he's number one, this was still a weird month for both the Warrior and the WWF, as conscious he wasn't connecting with the fans across the whole fan base the way former champion Hulk Hogan had. They made an attempt to humanise Warrior somewhat and make him more relatable with an appearance on the Brother Love show with one of his little warriors, a young girl identified as Amanda Ultimate Warrior, apparently Ultimate Warrior's niece, as Warrior earnestly proclaimed the biggest muscle he had was his heart that pumps with love for all his little warriors. It was just a really bad segment, which I've linked to in the video description. He got her to do a cartwheel and handstand and then kissed her and told her that he loved her. Even if it was his niece, the whole thing missed the mark and just came across really weird and creepy. And with Hogan off TV, Warrior was clearly not filling the gap left by Hogan's leave of absence in terms of connecting with a bigger audience. Look, the whole 1990 Warrior run is a prime example of why not everyone can be a tippy-top main eventer or face of the company. Warrior had been great as Intercontinental Champion the last couple of years, 100% the second most over guy in the company, intense and wild and someone the fans went nuts for. But when he was suddenly the figurehead of the whole company, everything that had been unique and exciting about him just suddenly seemed weird and ridiculous when the entire spotlight was on him and him alone. I genuinely think Warrior's career could have extended way longer than it did had they not put the world title on him in 1990. To be fair to Vince McMahon, sometimes you have to take a chance, but it was already clear just 2-3 months into his title reign that this was not working. Now, some of that blame's been retrospectively put on Rick Rude, who doesn't even make the top 10 this month, not being a credible foil for Warrior. And that's fair. In booking terms, Rude had spent the last year getting his ass kicked by Warrior over the IC title, then getting his ass kicked by Roddy Piper in an extended program. So Rude had hardly been presented as an unstoppable force that fans could rally against. But equally, the entire way Warrior was booked post-WrestleMania and the way Warrior was now presenting himself as champion just wasn't setting the world on fire. And the WWF as a whole was just really fumbling the ball a bit in mid-1990 without Hogan as their figurehead. And on top of everything else, Rude had actually picked up an injury and missed quite a lot of advertised house show main events during this period, with Warrior going back to facing Haku and manager Bobby Heenan in handicap matches instead. And incidentally, missing these house show main event matches and the payoffs for them would actually indirectly lead to Rude quitting the WWF later in the year, but that's getting ahead of ourselves. Right now, it was just yet another issue piling up for the WWF as their 1990 was starting to go off the rails a little bit. Bubbling under the top 10 for the WWF this month, as well as Rick Rude, were the team of Dusty Rhodes and Sweet Sapphire, who were headlining the B-level house shows against Randy Savage and Sensational Sherry in a series of WrestleMania 6 mixed tag rematches with Miss Elizabeth again in the corner of Dusty and Sapphire. New Intercontinental Champion Mr. Perfect had started a program against Brutus the Barber Beefcake, the man who handed him his first pinfall loss at WrestleMania. And Tag Team Champs Demolition continued their program against the Hart Foundation, but added a surprise new third member, Crush, the Pacific Northwest's Bryan Adams, covering for Axe's health issues, and Demolition formally turned heel again, saying they no longer cared about fans. With WWF having that long gap in their schedule between their big WrestleMania and SummerSlam shows, it gave other companies a bit of room to breathe. And this was a huge month in All Japan, who actually dominated this month's top 10, as Booker Giant Baba had started reshuffling the deck following the shock exit of Genichiro Tenryu a couple of months ago. And what Baba had decided to do was split his top programs and have the Gaijins, the foreigners, fight over the Triple Crown title, while Jumbo Tsuruta worked with Mitsuharu Misawa, the former Tiger Mask, to help elevate him up the card. So Jumbo dropped the Triple Crown Championship to Terry Gordy at the start of the month, only for Stan Hansen, who's a high place number 2 in the poll this month, to then beat Gordy, ranked number 5, just 3 days later at the company's big Budokan Hall show, which were the equivalent of All Japan's quarterly supercards, and have Hansen enter a twin program against both Gordy and his Miracle Violence Connection tag team partner, Dr. Death Steve Williams, himself ranked number 8, while Jumbo, ranked number 7, put over Misawa huge in the main event of Budokan in an all-time classic match, which is my match of the month for June, and which a lot of people consider one of the greatest matches of all time, at least in terms of historical significance, in terms of starting a completely new build for the company around Misawa and eventually transitioning away from Jumbo. That match, Misawa, who debuts at a very high number 3 ranking for June, starts out hot, but Jumbo hits a series of big moves that Misawa keeps kicking out of. The crowd has a huge amount of respect for Jumbo still, but gets solidly behind Misawa as the match goes on. Even a Jumbo folding powerbomb only gets a 2 count. Misawa gets a backslide and elbow strike, but he's too exhausted to cover. He goes for a top rope splash, but Tsuruta gets the knees up. A Boston Crab, but Misawa makes the ropes. A lariat only gets 2, and Jumbo's running out of ideas and looks frustrated. Another lariat only gets 2. He goes for the backdrop driver, but Misawa kicks off the buckles, and Tsuruta absorbs most of the impact. So, kind of desperate at this point, Tsuruta tries a big elbow strike of his own, but hurts his arm. He goes for another high knee, but Misawa moves, and Tsuruta clatters into the ropes, and the crowd is just molten at this point. The two jockey over a suplex, neither can get it. Jumbo shifts momentum to land for a 2 count. Misawa reverses and hooks the leg, and it's finally a 3 count. Misawa has pinned the ace. Jumbo looks broken, and Misawa's squad carry him around the ring on their shoulders. It's just a superb, superb match, and again, I've put a link to that in the description. Bubbling under the top 10 for All Japan, Kenta Kobashi and Akira Taue continued to be booked strongly as the best of All Japan's young guns, up against established veterans like the great Kabuki and Masafuji. All Japan and New Japan also continued to work together, in particular letting their American talent work across both companies. And this led to a much anticipated rematch between Stan Hansen as the Triple Crown champion and Big Van Vader, ranked number 9 for June, as the IWGP champion at the start of New Japan's Battle Line Kyushu tour. The match wasn't as dramatic an affair as their February Tokyo Dome match. No one's eye popped out, though it was still stiff as hell. Vader's nose actually got broken after Hansen swung his cowbell into Vader's mask during introductions. Vader was becoming more of a special attraction than a regular in New Japan at this point, as he was also being hyped to hell on TV by the NWA this month, as he was about to make his American pay-per-view debut the following month at the Great American Bash. Anyway, Hansen Vader round 2 went to a DQ finish, unsurprisingly, neither title changing hands. And bubbling under for New Japan, you had Shinya Hashimoto winning the Kyushu Cup, and Keiji Muto and Masa Chono regaining the IWGP Tag Team, reigning as IWGP Tag Team Champions. And those three, Hashimoto, Muto, and Chono, were fast gaining a reputation as New Japan's Three Musketeers and the company's rising native stars. Which takes us to the NWA, and the last 3 spots in this month's top 10. Ric Flair at number 4 remained NWA champion for one more month. Somewhat out of shape Junkyard Dog in at number 6, being brought in to challenge Flair at Clash of the Champions 11. New booker Ole Anderson was essentially finding former stars like JYD and Paul Orndorff at this point, who were in semi-retirement and would work cheap basically, while Sting, in at number 10, finished his knee rehab in time for his big showdown against Flair at the Great American Bash next month. So Flair and JYD headlined the Clash 11 TV special in a match that's been widely panned and derided, and yet again just ended in a big schmoz of Four Horsemen interference as Arn Anderson, Barry Windham, Sid Vicious, and Ole Anderson all piled into the ring to put a beating on the Dog, while Sting and his new Dudes with Attitudes faction, Lex Luger, Paul Orndorff, and a lost-looking El Gigante, came out to make the save with the top line attention to close the show, firmly shifting back to Flair versus Sting once again. And look, I'm going to have a bit of a rant. Watching both the build-up to and this match made me legit angry, not because it was a rare, bad Ric Flair match, which is often panned for, but because of the way it was booked. Junkyard Dog was mocked for years for seemingly being the one man incapable of having a good match with Ric Flair in this time period, being called the junk food dog, etc. But this was not all on JYD. In fact, I think Junkyard Dog was done a huge disservice by this match. Yes, he was out of shape. Yes, he no-sold almost all of Flair's offense to an almost disrespectful degree. But JYD had been a legit superstar for both Mid-South and the WWF just a few years previously, and this match had been built up on WCW TV as Dog looking to become the first black NWA World Champion, with a sizable part of the fanbase solidly behind him in that quest, and guys like Thunderbolt Patterson and Rocky King willing him on. When you book an angle like that, you can't just have the white bad guy gang beat him up, and then he immediately becomes an afterthought to the other, better white guy fighting the white guy the Dog just unfairly lost to. Everyone came out of this match looking bad. Flair came out of the match looking bad because he got his ass handed to him by the Dog, then got his ass handed to him by Sting afterwards. Dog came out of it looking bad because he dominated the match until getting jumped by the Horsemen, and at the very least, in kayfabe terms, surely deserved a rematch, but instead just immediately supported Sting and forgot all about becoming the first black NWA champion. And Sting came out of it looking bad because he just cut the line in front of Dog, demanded the next title shot against Flair to close the show, didn't even acknowledge Dog, and in storyline terms, just assumed Dog would now have his back. And most of all, the NWA looked bad because it just didn't occur to either Ole Anderson as booker or TBS executives that you can't run an angle like that and then just have the black challenger lose by foul play and apparently not be bothered by it. And neither did it occur to Jim Ross or Bob Caudle as announcers that JYD, again in kayfabe terms, had been completely screwed over here after all that race-based build-up on TV, and both of them just went into shill mode for Flair versus Sting next month at the Bash. So, yes, the Flair versus JYD match stank, but for totally different reasons than are widely referred to. And it was a shame because Clash 11 had actually been a good little show before the main event, but the whole thing just leaves a bad taste in the mouth, and there's a name for what was happening with all of this. A lot of individuals contributed to making this a bad headline match. All Junkyard Dog did was do Junkyard Dog things, yet he still, all these years later, seems to carry the can for it. Either book the guy as a big deal, or book him as a throwaway challenger of the month, but starting off one way and then finishing the other was just a bad look all around. Just horrible booking. Did Junkyard Dog stink up Clash 11? Maybe a little. But did WCW balls up the whole presentation of this match and angle around it? 100% yes. And that's completely on the promotion and presentation, not the wrestler. So yeah, rant over, but NWA WCW did not cover itself in glory this month. Before I wrap up June, let me just quickly touch on the other promotions outside the top 10. For EMLL, back in the Arena Mexico, the top Rudos this month were Pero Aguayo, Cien Caras, and Ringo Mendoza, with the top Technico being a big guy named Solomon Grundy. In the USWA, Jerry Lawler dropped the heavyweight title to the Snowman in Memphis, while Bill Dundee was trading the Southern title with John Tatum in the Dallas branch. In Portland, Scotty the Body regained the vacant Pacific Northwest title, beating the Grappler in a tournament final. and the AWA was still just about hanging on with Larry Zbyszko, AWA champion, as the infamous Team Challenge series played out on TV in front of an empty or near empty studio. So yeah, that's the wrestling landscape in June 1990. A slightly bleak state of affairs in North America, but solidly kicking ass in Japan. Please don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and I'll be back next time for July and the NWA's biggest show of the year, the Great American Bash, headlined by Ric Flair versus Sting in a match that was 6 months in the making. Cheers!